question of what the day after will look like is now hanging over everybody's head. The Western world operating under the assumptions that perhaps a more moderate Palestinian government might rule Gaza in the aftermath, with the United States suggesting the West Bank Palestinian Authority as a prime candidate. But a new survey of Palestinian attitudes reveals this to be a dangerous delusion. A poll by Birzeit University's Arab World for Research and Development of West Bank Palestinians found nothing moderate about them. A full 86% said they supported the October 7th torture, rape, and massacre of well over 1,200 Israelis. And an incredible 98% said they felt greater pride as Palestinians since those crimes against humanity. To discuss this more, we are joined by Marcus Sheff, CEO of the Institute for Monitoring Peace and Cultural Tolerance in School Education, otherwise known as Impact SE, who can tell us exactly what sort of hatred is taught to Palestinians from the cradle all the way to the grave. Marcus, it's good to have you with us. What we saw in that survey was numbers that were just mind-boggling to see. Ultimately, when we read into this, can it really be that high?
Yes, it absolutely can. Listen, I think we all know that poll surveys are snapshots in time. But when we look at the last few years of Palestinian education, it's less of a snapshot, frankly, and much more of a long-term review that we have of the way that Palestinian society views Jews, views Israel, and views itself in the context of the possibility of peace. And I must say that as far as the textbooks are concerned, there's absolutely no possibility whatsoever. You know, the textbooks taught in the Palestinian Authority are the same ones that are taught in Gaza. The textbooks taught by the Palestinian Authority are the same ones that are taught by UNRWA. So you have the West Bank, you have Gaza, you have UNRWA, you have the Palestinian Authority, you have Hamas. All of them are teaching exactly the same school curriculum. And it is a curriculum which is absolutely replete with ideas of jihad, of martyrdom, horrific ideas of how young people need to sacrifice themselves. It is not in the least a curriculum which puts forward the possibility of peacemaking. On the contrary, all ideas of peacemaking were taken out of this curriculum. And what is left is a vision of one state, one Palestine, from the river to the sea, which will be gained by the, if you like, the sacrifice of these young people. So what we saw on October the 7th, the absolute horror, the absolute atrocities of October the 7th, is something that Impact SC has been warning about for years. We warned that there was a direct link between hate teaching, financially supported by the international community, really important to say that, and committing these atrocities. So these 3,000 terrorists, the majority of whom one would imagine went to UNRWA schools, as those are the majority of the schools in Gaza, were studying exactly the same curriculum as the Palestinian Authority teaches in the West Bank. You know, there was a review, if you like, a reform, a change of the curriculum between 2014 and 2016. The curriculum became even worse than it was before. It became singularly obsessed with this idea of jihad and martyrdom, the idea of cutting the neck of the enemy. Such a terrible thing, it's barely possible to say that on television. This is part of the Palestinian school curriculum. The absolute dehumanization of Israelis and Jews is part of the Palestinian curriculum. So the people who were surveyed went through this educational process. Again, so hard to call it education because what it is a strategic program by the Palestinian Authority to make sure that there are hundreds of thousands of people who are willing to sacrifice themselves and hundreds of thousands of people who are willing to applaud horrific, barbaric acts of Palestinians out of Gaza.
Marcus, this sort of indoctrination has been implemented over generations now, to the point where, as that survey said, 98%, it's a hard number to believe, have these views. How do you even begin to uproot that sort of indoctrination?
Honestly, I'm not sure that you can. I do not think, and you know, there are a great deal of folks all over the world who look at de-radicalization and how that works, it's spotty. It is not particularly successful. Why? Because school education is uniquely authoritative. And that, by the way, is particularly the case in the Middle East, where you get one book, one grade, one subject. These are the values. This is the identity which is passed down to young people in schools. They do not arrive at the age of 6 at these schools with jihadi ideas, with these terrible ideas of acting out of violence. But if in first grade, you teach these 6, 7-year-olds an Arabic letter, the letter Ha, through the idea of martyr, shaheed, or through the idea of attack, hujum, do not be surprised when the whole curriculum continues year after year, grade after grade, subject after subject, to indoctrinate young people with these ideas from first grade to 12th grade. So anybody who's been through that process, I genuinely do not think there is a particularly efficient, successful way of de-radicalizing these views. As I say, there are people in the West who are specializing in this. One can argue as to the level of success. But there is one thing you can do, which is stop it now. Don't let this carry on. Stop this hate indoctrination right now, both in the West Bank and in Gaza, in those schools, from the Palestinian Authority to UNRWA, to whatever will take the place of those Hamas schools the day after. There has to be an education which is based on ideas of peace and tolerance. It is not just not too much to ask, it is absolutely critical that we demand this, and that we demand this right now, before the day after. We have to make sure that the international community, which funds the educational processes, no longer allows for hate teaching, because we've seen the result. The result was October the 7th. The result is the absolute horror and brutality which we all witnessed. And this poll gives you an idea that these exact same ideas are not exactly hiding themselves in dark corners in the West Bank either.
Marcus, for those of us that grew up in the West with Western educations, we have trouble wrapping our minds around just what could even be taught to bring people to commit these sort of acts. Can you give us some specific examples of what these textbooks include so that the viewers can understand just what we're looking at here?
Sure. So as I said, the textbooks contain the idea of cutting the necks of the enemy. I come back to this because October the 7th was the acting out of this lesson. The textbooks teach young people that dying is better than living. This is a profound idea. This is an idea drilled into a young person's head, that their own death in some form of glorious jihadi way is better than, and the textbook says, living a long and happy life. The textbooks are very clear about who Jews are and who Israelis are. Even Judaism itself, forget Jews, there is a teacher's guide in the Palestinian Authority which tells teachers to mark students down if they do not connect the religion of Judaism to the idea of murder. An absolutely shocking, hateful idea. And yet, this is connected to, if you like, the educational success of these students. They are clearly told in lesson after lesson, in grade after grade, about the importance of jihad. It is made clear to them that their violent attack is expected of them. There is example after example in textbook after textbook. And what you are left is with a very clear, as I said, strategy created by the Palestinian Authority to ensure the radicalization of generation after generation of Palestinians.
Marcus, it's a sort of terrifying, eye-opening look into what happens there to get